Chapter 3, The Conflict Perspective. Introduction. Substance is an individual behavior that takes place in specific social environments. The person's class, social status, and in education and other stressors can create conditions for substance use and abuse. The consequences of substance abuse and use affects people in different categories. Sources of inspiration. Conflict perspective is a moral code that is set up by society or a power struggle. Conflict perspective was inspired by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. They stated that the history of societies is a class struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletarians. Under capitalism, the state is organized in hierarchical systems that has the interests of owners of production. The worst crime is the exploitation of workers by capitalism. In Marx's criminology, the capitalistic system makes both proletarians and the bourgeoisie's crime-prone, but the proletarian class is officially recognized as criminals. Many law enforcers discriminate and target lower-class individuals. Marxism came back during the 1968 in the book The New Criminology. The author declared that the struggles stem from the distribution and resource of power. The owner of labor will bond only by civil law, which regulates their competition between each other. In the U.S., criminology was pursued at the School of Criminology at UC Berkeley. Marxism argues that the law in criminology protects capitalism so that capitalism can thrive. If a person from either class threatens capitalism, they are considered a criminal. Austin Turk expanded the idea that different crimes are favored by those who control the justice system. In the United States, white-collar crimes and petty theft are treated differently. White-collar crimes are punished least even though they cost society millions of dollars, while petty theft is punished a lot more. Power control theory says that different genders, class positions, and structure of family in the explanation of conflict perspective. Those in power use their own language to define crime and law. The state of punish and control as crime encourages rather than crime discourage. Peacemaking criminologists turn to a mutual aid, meditation, and conflict resource in humanistic conditions as a result of solutions to crime and other social problems. View and position on drugs and enforcement of drugs and the drug wars seem to lodge in the general dynamics of national or international media, economy, and politics. Drug prohibition creates and marginalizes dangerous classes. The drug war generates a spread antagonism, fear, crime, and violence.
The definition of conflict refers to the discord of one's feelings or action, the incompatibility of one idea or event to another, the opposition of one interest or principle to another, or the general situation of disequilibrium, disagreement, or tension of confrontation. Conflict can occur in several different ways when it comes to the substance abuse and use and abuse. Different forms can range from interpersonal to personal, physical to mental, materialistic versus moralistic, race versus culture, nature versus nurture, and etc. These conflicts can be because of unfulfilled dreams, because of anxiety, or even biochemistry or physical defects. They can even be more simple problems such as just disputing with family members constantly, or imprisonment, or poverty, or even the protest against injustice. These can also be in different levels of severity and can affect different people in different ways. So this conflict perspective is to analyze.
Today's video is sponsored by Hot Cheetos and Arizona. So we're going to be speaking about substance use and how it can be a conflict. You may ask yourself how, and the answer is because of transitional stages. The transitional stages that follow are the fact that you first start abusing a substance, and from there you get attached to it, you build dopamine, your cells build dopamine cells in your brain, which makes you an addict. So let's just take a step back and see how we're going to transition there. So a substance, first and foremost, is a neutral object. It's neutral, but once you touch it, that's when it has a negative effect on some users. For example, alcohol may get someone aggravated after a certain amount of drinks. This may not be the intentions of the person initially, but it's the result. Another example is if you're at work and your boss or manager gives you a hard time, you may go back to your house and de-stress by cracking a cold one, or smoking some marijuana, or even doing a line of cocaine. Everyone is different, and at the same time too, we also have to keep in mind of prescribed medical drugs. These are abused as well. Humans search also to fill a void of emptiness, meaning that if a person is going through relationship issues with either their partner or their family members, or simply lost a family member or a friend, they want to fill that void. They're feeling down. So what do? You resort in consuming such substances, especially like alcohol. Substances also carry a social stigma with them, meaning that a bottle of $6,000 may label at somebody with wealth and power in comparison to somebody with 40 ounce, of a Miller High Life. That person may be seen as someone that's delinquent or deviant, or just someone that is seen negative by society. So once you start using these substances, you build a tolerance for them too. And on top of that too, once you build a tolerance, you start becoming addicted to these substances. These substances can eventually mess up your financial struggle, can eventually affect you by your financial struggles, because you invest all your income into obtaining these drugs or this alcohol or whatever it may be. So once you build this tolerance, and let's say for example you want to quit one day or whatever it may be, it's not from zero to the next day, bada bing bada boom. No, you go through withdrawals, meaning that your body is going to experience withdrawals that can either make you sweat really much, or can also just make you taste the drug, as in if virtually, or imagine you being high or whatever it may be. So once you start going through withdrawals, that's when you notice that wow, I really built a tolerance for this drug or for this substance. So substance users are also frequently frowned upon and labeled as deviant, because they're seen as the problem of society. They're seen as someone that, that's the reason why they're poor, because they're using these drugs or whatever it may be. But one has to always remember not to judge a book by its cover. So that ends it with substance use and how it can create conflict, and how also society revolves around it. Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the presentation.
The conflict perspective focuses on the contrast of ideologies, interests, and actions among people, groups, agencies, and other social forces in the field of substance use and abuse. When conflict occurs, substance use, and substance users are symbols, sites, or barriers of various social contradictions and confrontations, from economic segregation, political marginalization, and culture clash to racial ethnic division. Substance is symbol of conflict. Substance comes from nature. It symbolizes contradictions inherent in the relationship between human beings and their natural environments. Human beings, in their natural adaptation process, continually search for substances of nutritional, medical, decoration, entertainment, and various other uses. While substances offered directly by or made up with materials from nature serve human beings their major purposes, they also bring about various side effects to the human body and mind. Some of the causes could be physical disorders. Some of them lead to physical deficiencies. Substance is often used in society to signify problematic situations such as deficiency, malfunction, lack of control, addiction, and helplessness. For example, food beyond its normal intake can appear as malnutrition, gluttony, or obesity. Medicine is associated with disease or defects. Alcohol implies gratification, indulgence, and avoidance of social responsibility. Substance expresses contradiction and conflict between body and mind, needs and demands, expectations and outcomes, means and ends, and eventually individuals and society.
My name is Diana, and I'm going to talk about how substance use is a site of contradiction, located on pages 61 and 62. In the book, it states that substance use initiates, reinforces, and follows conflict. Those using the substances do it for either attention, let off frustration, or to cause a rebellious act. Young adults who are exposed to substance usually do it to impress others or those who are older than them to prove that they can be like them. They want to prove themselves worthy to be a part of whatever group they are in, and they also want to seem cool or prove something or someone wrong. Turning to substance use as a form of a solution means that they have lost hope in the social system. This relates the most to those who are economically, politically, or culturally disadvantaged. Those who are at an advantage tend to use substances as a form to gain some sort of status, get attention, gain some type of control, or get an advantage in their position. Substance use is also a sign of power. Those who are rich, old, or advantaged tend to gain power by substances because only they can afford the good stuff. Substance abuse is shown to you as something that is bad, and if it is done, you will be punished. And also, substance use is created as a proportion of social menace.
The theoretical component is whether substance users are creators, messengers, or victims of confrontation. So, substance users are both active and passive agents in the use of substances or in the process of usage. So, as active agents, they use the substance such as alcohol or drugs, and they're passive agents as they suffer the consequences of this not normal usage of these two sort of substances. So substance is a symbol of conflict, and substance use is a site of contradiction. So substance users are actually creator, messengers, and victims of confrontation. So substance users are as creators of confrontation. So users produce, verify, solidify, and escalate conflict situations. So within themselves, they drink to get hungover, in a fight to manage transient feelings such as depression, anxiety, stress. They actually verify and solidify these feelings and actually makes the situation worse. And manageable cases of conflict actually become into like a full-blown conflict when users turn to substances in a way to escape the situations. So beyond themselves, users also have conflicts and create conflict within others. So one example is if the husband smokes, he could actually cause secondhand smoke effects towards his spouse or any other people around him. And users create conflict within their families, and basically their issues with substances actually also reflects in their academic success. So because of substance users' medical conditions, safety hazards they present, and the moral danger they optimize, they become easy targets to medical professionals, justice official conservatives, and politicians to attack. So, so now, substance users as messengers of confrontation. So, in this way, the user becomes kind of like a spokesperson in regards to the issue. So they could use stories, they could tell their stories through the mass media and academic studies about the pain and suffering they've experienced as users. So they kind of raise awareness in that sense, and this is the way they explicitly speak about the fundamental contradictions and divisions in human life and across societies in regards to substance use. So implicitly, users signify underlying conflicts and problems in the human body, mind, social relations, and natural political economic environments. So, for example, users actually are messengers in the sense that they bring light into the fact that some users are users because of either mental or genetic issues they're born with. They also, some users and abuse substances become abusive because of relationships they have with others, such as abusive relationships with their spouse, with friends and family. In addition to being creators and messengers of confrontation, substance users are also victims of confrontation. So substance users become scapegoats for financial stress, budget shortfalls, moral decay, and other problems at the local, regional, national, and international level. So some of the things that are blamed upon substance users include the drainage of government budgets, the overload of the justice system. They're also set to allure and bribe politicians and justice officials, and they overwhelm medical facilities and social service agencies.
As victims in social confrontation, substance abusers become scapegoats and are blamed for things such as draining government budgets, scaring away customers, and are ultimately responsible for downfalls in morality. From a critical point of view, all these blames can be met with logically sound and solid counterarguments. Most critically, substance abusers may be wrongfully charged by most members of society for whatever they are not able to deal with in their own capacities. Conflicts involving substance abuse and substance users vary in type and nature, such as intrapersonal conflicts, interpersonal conflicts, intra-agency conflicts, and interagency conflicts. The nature of conflict can be both personal and direct, emotional and intense. Approaching substance use as both subject and object of conflict, the conflict perspective opens up a number of questions for theoretical exploration. Beginning with substance use as a subject of conflict, why are some substances more likely than others to cause addictions, controversies, and problems? Use itself may also be scrutinized in terms of time, location, or other essential features. Substance abusers may become differentiated in conflict by age, race, gender, and various social characteristics.
Theoretical applications and empirical tests. The conflict perspective and its theoretical applications and empirical tests as the subject of substance use and abuse. There are two components to the theoretical applications and empirical tests. The first component is theoretical applications, and the second component is empirical tests. When it comes to theoretical applications, they are approaching substance use as a subject and object of conflict. Substance use and conflict, conflict in substance, and what are the arguments. The second component, empirical test, involves the critical perspective in substance use, case studies. And when it comes to case studies, there are two parts: substance users, cause of substance use and abuse. And also there's the historical analysis, survey research, and approaches in experimentation. Now, when it comes to experimentation, there are two parts: mental disorder and substance use, and quasi-experimental designs. So, in approaching the conflict perspective in regard to theoretical applications and empirical tests, the use and abuse of substance is researched by asking and combining of questions that try to infer the factors of conflict and why an empirical test is required in order to obtain the necessary data. Substance is the subject of several questions. Does substance use create conflict? And if substance use creates conflict, what kind of conflict? Why are users stigmatized? Uh, since we're studying the subject of juvenile delinquency, we can say that oftentimes juveniles are stigmatized, are marked as drug addicts or substance or they abuse substance. But what kind of substance do they abuse? And the empirical tests are a critical perspective in substance use and abuse, which involves case studies and concessions of use and abuse by users. Also, experimentation determines if substance use and abuse causes mental disorders. So, in order to acquire, the desired results, or in order to acquire, the answers or find the answers, a method or quasi-experimental design is required. So, these are the theoretical applications and empirical tests, and what involves, and what causes the conflict when it comes to substance use and abuse by users.
Hello, my name is Christina Lopez and I'll be discussing public health with a conflict perspective. When handling patients with substance abuse problems, they only know what is presented to them, so they only have the doctor-patient role with one another. However, by using the conflict perspective, health professionals can view outside social factors that play a role in the substance abuse, such as family, school, or work. And with all this knowledge, health professionals can find alternative methods to help their clients. For example, family counseling, vocational training, or group sessions. In addition, health professionals need to better understand their own conflict so they can better help their patients.
My part was social control. In social control, agents view substance use as questionable, potentially dangerous, and outright rule-breaking. Substance users are often seen as troublemakers, deviants, and law violators. They are to be regulated, monitored, and controlled. They're often watched, supervised, and sometimes they get caught up. Conflict perspective reinforces social control agents in their vigilance against substance use and users. Substance users can disrupt social order, and they may attempt everything possible in order to get away from detention, investigation, and intervention. Given the fundamental conflict of social control agents have with substance users, some due process procedures may be instituted to protect substance users in their basic human rights and civil liberties. Social control agents may come to understand why substance users hold hostile attitudes towards and even take dangerous actions against them. When they know what needs and interests substance users have and how substance users are forced into the corner through cultural stereotyping, political oppression, and economic deprivation, and social discrimination. Social agents may look into the conflict substance users experiences with various parties in their environments.
And community. The community provides a refuge where substance users, along with their neighbors of various lifestyles, express their feelings, meet their needs, and pursue their interests, recognizing the generally hostile and often repressive measures taken by the outside social agencies, such as drug control and treatment authorities. Towards substance users, the community may conspire to act as a safe haven of protection, a source of understanding, or a buffering zone for substance use and those who practice it.
Was on work and organization. In an employment organization, their interests are to hire and keep qualified employees who perform their assigned duties with competence. When an employee has a substance abuse problem, the organization can go two ways about it. One is to cover it up, and the second way is to cut it off. When an employment organization chooses to cover up their employee's problem, they are essentially helping their employee. They do this by downplaying the problem in public, fighting prosecution through every legal avenue, protecting evidence from the police, and seeking professional assistance. When the organization chooses to cut off their employee, they do the exact opposite. They decide to fire them, and they do this in order to avoid negative publicity. They are making it clear to the public that the employee's substance abuse problem is their own problem and has nothing to do with the company. More recently, the government has called for drug testing, employer assistance, and other on-job substance service programs with employment organizations. The different ways in which employment organizations handle the demand depends on how they perceive their fundamental interests and how they relate their own needs to general social responsibilities. When substance abuse is perceived as a societal issue, then employers will make an effort to assist their employees. They are more willing to offer programs such as sick leave, on-job counseling, or paid treatment if they find it cost effective in retaining an experienced, loyal, and productive employee. The conflict perspective shows us how an employment organization interacts with the needs of other groups, such as the government, unions, and the community. Substance use and its users can be identified as consequences of this conflict. There are many contradictions between the use of a substance and the human who actually uses it. The origin of substance use can vary from one's own environment to their personal history, such as mental disorders. Substance users also represent a particular voice, along with ideologies that generally contradict wide societal beliefs and norms. Because of how much they stand out, they are easy prey and are targeted by criminal justice officials, medical professionals, and service personnel. In conclusion, the conflict perspective identifies and analyzes essential needs and interests of various social roles and forces involved in substance and substance use.